I raised her with nothing but love, worked 3 jobs to put her through college, and celebrated every success like it was my own. Then she made millions, moved to a mansion, and told me I wasn't good enough for her new life anymore. My name is Martha, and I'm 62 years old. I've lived through more heartbreak than most people see in a lifetime. But nothing prepared me for the day my own daughter looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worthy of her success. This is the story of how I raised a daughter who forgot where she came from, and the painful lesson we both had to learn about what really matters in life. It started in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town. The walls were thin, the heat barely worked in winter, and the neighbors upstairs had screaming matches that kept little Jessica awake at night. But it was home. It was all I could afford after her father walked out when she was just 3 years old, leaving nothing but empty promises and a stack of unpaid bills. You know that feeling when you're standing in your kitchen at 5 in the morning, counting coins to see if you have enough for milk and bread? That was my reality for years. I worked at Betty's Diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then rushed home to spend exactly 1 hour with Jessica before heading to my evening job cleaning offices downtown. On weekends, I babysat for the wealthy families across town, watching their children play with toys that cost more than my monthly rent. Jessica was different from other kids, though. While her friends were content with dolls and games, she was always building something, always dreaming bigger. She'd take cardboard boxes and create elaborate businesses, complete with handwritten signs and play money. "Mama," she'd say, her eyes bright with possibility, "when I grow up, I'm going to have my own company, and we're going to live in a big house with a pool." I'd smile and tell her anything was possible if she worked hard enough. I believed it too. The years blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and determination. I remember selling my mother's wedding ring to pay for Jessica's school supplies. I remember choosing between groceries and new shoes for her growing feet, always choosing her needs over mine. My hands were permanently stained from cleaning chemicals. My back ached from standing all day. But every time I saw Jessica's report card filled with A's, every time she won a science fair or got picked for the honor roll, I felt like I was flying. I thought I was giving her everything she needed, but I had no idea what that success would cost me. When Jessica turned 16, she got her first job at a local bookstore. I was so proud watching her count her first paycheck, the way she carefully folded those bills and put them in her wallet. "I'm going to save every penny for college, Mama," she promised. And she did. While other teenagers were spending their money on clothes and movies, Jessica was already thinking about her future, already planning her escape from our small world. The college application process was brutal. I worked double shifts to pay for application fees, standardized tests, and campus visits. I remember driving our old beat-up car to the state university, praying it wouldn't break down on the highway. Jessica sat in the passenger seat, studying her notes even during the 2-hour drive. She had this focus, this hunger for something more, that both impressed and worried me. You know that feeling when you're so proud of someone that your chest physically hurts? That's what I felt watching Jessica walk across that stage at her high school graduation. She was valedictorian, full scholarship to business school, destined for greatness. I sat in that auditorium in my best dress, which was really just my church dress that I'd worn to every important event for the past 5 years, and I cried. I cried because I was proud, yes, but also because I knew things were about to change. College transformed Jessica in ways I didn't expect. She'd come home for holidays talking about her classmates, their families, their lifestyles. She'd mention casually that her roommate's father owned 3 houses, or that her study group met at someone's country club. I could see her absorbing this new world, comparing it to our small apartment, our modest life. The day she graduated, I cried tears of joy. If only I knew they'd be the last happy tears I'd shed over her for years. Jessica's first job was at a tech company in the city. The salary seemed enormous to me, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. She moved into a small apartment closer to work, and I was happy for her independence. She'd call me every Sunday, telling me about her projects, her coworkers, her dreams of starting her own business someday. I'd listen, offering what advice I could, though I often felt like I was speaking a foreign language when she talked about her corporate world. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. The phone calls became shorter. The visits home became less frequent. When she did come by, she'd look around our old apartment with different eyes, as if seeing it for the first time. She'd make comments about the neighborhood, about safety, about how I should really consider moving somewhere nicer. I'd remind her that this was home, that this was where we'd built our life together, but she'd just shake her head and change the subject. She started saying things like, "You wouldn't understand," when I asked about her work. I should have seen the warning signs. The woman who raised her, who sacrificed everything for her dreams, was slowly becoming someone she felt she needed to protect her new image from. I didn't realize it then, but I was already being edited out of her success story, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. The foundation we'd built together, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, was crumbling beneath the weight of her ambition and my supposed inadequacy. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The daughter I'd raised with unconditional love was about to teach me that success, for some people, comes with conditions I never could have imagined. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was washing dishes after another long day at the diner when Jessica's voice crackled through the speaker, electric with excitement. "Mama, I did it! I finally did it! I'm starting my own company!" Her words tumbled out so fast I could barely keep up. She'd been working on some kind of app, something about connecting small businesses with customers, and she'd been pitching it to investors for months. I dried my hands on my apron and sat down at my small kitchen table, the same one where she'd done homework for 12 years. "Tell me everything, sweetheart," I said, and for the next hour, she did. She talked about market research and user interfaces and venture capital, words that sounded like a foreign language to me, but I listened to every single one. Her passion was infectious, and I found myself getting caught up in her excitement, even though I didn't understand half of what she was saying. "The only problem is," she said, her voice dropping slightly, "I need to quit my job and work on this full time. I've got some savings, but it's going to be tight for a while. Really tight." I knew what she was asking before she even asked it. This was my daughter, my baby, chasing her dream, and if she needed help, I was going to give it to her. I didn't tell her that I'd already been skipping meals to save money, or that I'd been putting off fixing my car's brakes because I couldn't afford the repair. I didn't tell her that I'd been picking up extra shifts at the diner, working 7 days a week until my feet were so swollen I could barely walk. Instead, I said, "How much do you need?" For the next 6 months, I became Jessica's silent partner. I sent her money every week, sometimes my entire paycheck, keeping only enough for rent and basic groceries. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more nights than I care to remember. I wore the same 3 outfits to work in rotation, washing them by hand to save on laundry costs. When the other waitresses at the diner started a pool to help me buy a winter coat because mine was falling apart, I was too proud to accept it, but too poor to refuse. Jessica would call me every few days with updates. Some days were good, full of potential clients and promising meetings. Other days were devastating, filled with rejected pitches and dwindling bank accounts. On those bad days, I'd find myself crying after we hung up, not because I was worried about the money I was sending her, but because I could hear the defeat in her voice, and it broke my heart. You know that feeling when you'd give anything to take away your child's pain? That's what kept me going. Every dollar I sent, Every sacrifice I made, every night I went to bed hungry, it was all worth it if it meant Jessica could pursue her dreams. The breakthrough came almost exactly 1 year after that first phone call. Jessica's voice was different this time, shakier, like she couldn't quite believe what she was saying. Mama, sit down. I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down first. I was already sitting, but I gripped the edge of my kitchen table anyway. I got it. I got the funding. Not just a little bit, Mama. $2 million. 2 million. I couldn't speak. The number was so large, so impossible, that it didn't seem real. $2 million was more money than I'd made in my entire lifetime. It was more money than I'd ever even imagined having. Are you sure? I whispered. Are you absolutely sure? She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I'm sure. I'm so sure. And Mama, the first thing I'm going to do is pay you back every penny you lent me, plus interest. You're going to be so proud of me. I was already proud of her. I'd been proud of her since the day she was born. But as the weeks passed and Jessica's life began to change at lightning speed, I started to realize that my pride might not be enough anymore. The day she got that first $1 million check, I barely recognized the person who called to tell me. Her voice was still excited, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite identify. She talked about hiring employees and renting office space and buying a new car. She mentioned meeting with important people, people whose names I should recognize but didn't. She used words like networking and brand image and market positioning with the confidence of someone who'd always belonged in that world. When she invited me to see her new office, I was thrilled. I put on my best dress, the same one I'd worn to her college graduation, and took 2 buses across town to reach the gleaming building in the business district. The lobby was all marble and glass, with a security guard who looked at me like I was lost. I had to show ID and get a visitor's badge just to reach the elevator. Jessica met me on the 15th floor, and I almost didn't recognize her. She was wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was styled in a way that looked effortless, but I knew must have taken hours, and she carried herself differently, straighter, more confident. She was beautiful, successful, everything I'd ever dreamed she could become. The tour of her office was like walking through a magazine. Everything was sleek and modern, from the glass conference rooms to the coffee machine that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Jessica introduced me to her employees, young people who smiled politely and shook my hand, but I could see them taking in my appearance, my simple dress, my worn shoes. I felt like I was visiting a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. This is my mother, Jessica said to one particularly well-dressed young man. She's the reason I'm here today. She put her arm around my shoulders, and I felt a flush of pride. But then she added, she taught me that hard work pays off. And something in her tone made me feel like she was explaining me rather than introducing me. The ride home was quiet. Jessica offered to drive me, which was generous, but I could tell she was distracted, already thinking about her next meeting, her next project. When we pulled up to my apartment building, she looked around the neighborhood with new eyes. Mama, this area isn't safe. You should really think about moving somewhere nicer. I can help you now, you know. I looked at my building, the same building where I'd raised her, where we'd been happy despite everything. This is home, Jessica. This is where we built our life together. She sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested I was being stubborn about something obvious. I know, but you deserve better now. We both do. That night, I lay in bed thinking about her words. We both deserve better. When had I become part of her past that needed improving? When had the life we'd built together become something to be ashamed of? The changes accelerated after that. Jessica moved into a penthouse apartment in the most expensive part of the city. She bought a car that cost more than I'd made in 5 years. She started posting photos on social media that showed glimpses of her new life, elegant dinners and business conferences, and weekends at places that looked like they belonged in movies. Her phone calls became less frequent, and when she did call, she seemed distracted, like she was multitasking. She'd tell me about her success, about the important people she was meeting, about the deals she was making, but she stopped asking about my life, about the diner, about how I was doing. The first time she invited me to her new apartment, I spent an hour getting ready, choosing my outfit carefully, even borrowing my neighbor's pearl necklace to try to look more presentable. The apartment was breathtaking, all floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture, but I felt like I was in a museum, afraid to touch anything. Jessica was a gracious host, giving me a tour and making coffee in a machine that looked like it belonged in a professional kitchen. But I could sense her watching me, gauging my reactions, maybe even judging them. When I accidentally knocked over a small glass figurine, she was quick to reassure me that it was fine, but I saw her carefully check it for damage when she thought I wasn't looking. She introduced me to her friends as the woman who helped raise me, not as her mother. The woman who helped. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in her beautiful living room, surrounded by people in expensive clothes talking about investments and market trends, and I felt like I was disappearing. The woman who helped raise her, as if I was one of many people who'd contributed to her success, as if 23 years of love and sacrifice and dedication could be summarized so casually. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in her marble vanity. The woman looking back at me seemed older, smaller, more out of place than I'd ever felt before. My dress, which had seemed nice enough in my own mirror, looked cheap and outdated in this gleaming space. My hands, permanently stained from years of cleaning and cooking and working, seemed rough and ugly next to the polished surfaces. When I returned to the living room, the conversation had moved on to topics I couldn't follow. Jessica was animated, laughing at jokes I didn't understand, speaking a language of success and ambition that I'd never learned. She belonged here, in this world of beautiful people and expensive things, and I was just a reminder of where she'd come from. The evening ended with polite goodbyes and promises to get together soon, but I could tell that Jessica was relieved when I finally left. As I waited for the bus in front of her building, I watched the lights in her apartment, knowing that her real life was just beginning, the life where I was becoming more and more of a stranger. Then came the day she asked me not to come to her company party. That's when I knew I was losing her. The phone call was brief, almost businesslike. There was going to be a celebration, she explained. Investors and clients and important people from the industry. It's going to be pretty formal, Mama, very business focused. I don't think you'd enjoy it. But I could hear what she wasn't saying. I wouldn't fit in. I would embarrass her. I was a liability to the image she was so carefully crafting. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the table where she'd done homework, where we'd eaten countless meals together, where I'd listened to her dreams and fears and hopes. The daughter I'd raised, the one who used to curl up next to me on the couch and tell me I was the best mother in the world, was slowly but surely editing me out of her story. And the worst part was, I was starting to understand why. The confrontation came 3 weeks later, on a rainy Thursday afternoon that I'll never forget. Jessica had called that morning, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "Mama, I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench, but I said yes, of course she could come over. She was still my daughter, still welcome in the home where I'd raised her. She arrived in her expensive car, dressed in another one of those perfect suits that made her look like she belonged in a magazine. Blaine. But her face was different, set in a way that reminded me of her father right before he'd walked out on us. She sat down at our old kitchen table, the same table where she'd told me about her dreams, where we'd planned her future together, and she looked at me with the expression of someone about to deliver bad news. Mama, we need to talk about some things, she began, her voice careful and measured. About my life now, about my career, about what's appropriate and what isn't. I felt my heart start to race. What do you mean, sweetheart? She took a deep breath, and I could see her gathering her courage. I'm at a critical point in my business. The next few months are going to determine whether I succeed or fail on a much bigger scale. I'm meeting with investors who could change everything, clients who could make or break my company, and I need to be very careful about my image, about how I present myself and my background. The words hit me like cold water. Your background? Yes, Mama, my background. Look, I love you, I do, but we have to be realistic about this. The people I'm dealing with now, they come from a different world. They have certain expectations, certain standards. And I can't afford to have anything that might make them question my credibility or my ability to operate at their level. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Are you telling me that I'm bad for your business? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I'm telling you that I need to be strategic about how I present myself. These people, they judge everything. Your clothes, your accent, your background, where you come from. It's not fair, but it's reality. So, what are you saying, Jessica? What exactly are you asking me to do? She finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Shame. She was ashamed of me. I'm asking you to understand that there are going to be events, situations, where it's better if you're not there. Not because I don't love you, but because I need to protect what I've built. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the rain against the windows, the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the sound of my own heart breaking. You're asking me to hide. I'm asking you to be supportive of my success. By pretending I don't exist? Her jaw tightened. By understanding that not everything is about you, Mama. This is about my future, my career, my life. I've worked too hard to let anything jeopardize it now. I stood up from the table, my legs shaky. Anything. You just called me anything. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. That's exactly what you meant. I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd raised her, where we'd been happy despite having so little. Do you remember when you were 7 years old and you wanted to be in the school play? You had to have a costume, and we couldn't afford to buy one. So I stayed up all night making you a dress out of old bed sheets and fabric scraps. Mama, please don't. You wore that dress like it was made of gold. You were so proud, so happy. And when you won the part, you ran to me first, before anyone else, and you said, Mama, we did it. We did it together. I turned back to face her, tears streaming down my face. We, that's what you said. We did it together. When did I stop being part of your we, Jessica? She was crying too now, but her voice was still firm. Things change, Mama. I've changed. My life has changed. I can't live in the past anymore. I'm not asking you to live in the past. I'm asking you to remember who you are, where you came from, who loved you before you had a penny to your name. I know who I am, she said, standing up. I'm a successful businesswoman. I'm someone who made something of herself. I'm not the poor girl from the wrong side of town anymore. But that poor girl is still part of you, and that poor girl's mother is still part of your story, whether you like it or not. She walked to the door, then stopped and turned back to me. I'm sorry, Mama, I really am, but I can't let sentiment destroy what I've built. I've worked too hard to get where I am, and I won't let anyone or anything pull me back down. As I stood in her marble foyer, being told I wasn't good enough for her new life, I realized I'd raised a stranger. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. Jessica stopped calling altogether. I'd see updates about her company on the local news, photos of her at business events and charity galas, always surrounded by people in expensive clothes, always smiling that perfect, polished smile. She looked happy, successful, like she belonged in that world of wealth and status. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's face. I fell into a depression that scared me. I'd go through the motions of my daily routine, working at the diner, coming home to my empty apartment, eating my simple meals alone. But inside, I felt hollow, like a part of me had been carved out and thrown away. I'd raised a daughter who was now too good for the woman who'd given her everything. You know that feeling when you question everything you thought you knew about love? That's where I lived for months. I wondered if I'd somehow failed her, if I'd been too soft, too generous, too willing to sacrifice my own needs for hers. I wondered if I'd enabled her to become someone who could discard people like used tissues when they no longer served her purposes. The other waitresses at the diner tried to cheer me up, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They'd heard me talk about Jessica for years, bragging about her success, her accomplishments, her bright future. Now they watched me go through the motions of my days like a ghost, and they knew something had gone terribly wrong. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who'd lived in the building longer than anyone, would sometimes sit with me in the evenings. She'd bring tea and listen to me talk about Jessica, about how proud I'd been, about how confused I was now. One night, she looked at me with her wise old eyes and said, "Martha, you raised a successful daughter, but success without gratitude is just greed, and greed is a disease that makes people forget who they really are." I spent months wondering if I'd somehow failed her until I realized the truth was much more painful. The truth was that I hadn't failed Jessica. I'd succeeded too well. I'd given her everything she needed to succeed, including the belief that she deserved better than what she'd come from. I'd taught her to reach for the stars, but I'd forgotten to teach her to remember the ground she'd launched from. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 18 months after our confrontation. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang and Jessica's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. The silence between us had become so complete that seeing her name was like seeing a ghost. "Mama?" Her voice was small, broken, nothing like the confident businesswoman who'd dismissed me from her life. "Mama, I need you." I sat down heavily on my bed, my heart pounding. "What's wrong?" "Everything. Everything is wrong. The business, the investors, the people I thought were my friends. It's all falling apart, and I don't know what to do." Through her tears, the story came out. The investors who'd promised her the world had pulled their funding when her company hit a rough patch. The clients who'd seemed so loyal had jumped ship at the first sign of trouble. The friends who'd surrounded her at all those glamorous events had stopped returning her calls when she could no longer afford to pick up the check. "I might lose everything, Mama. The company, the apartment, the car. I might have to start over with nothing." I listened to her sob, this woman who'd become too successful to need her mother, and I felt something shift inside me. Not satisfaction at her downfall, but something deeper, more complex. Relief, maybe, that the daughter I'd raised was still in there somewhere, under all that polish and pride. "What do you want from me, Jessica?" "I want you to help me. I want you to tell me what to do. I want you to be my mother again." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. When she needed me most, would I be there? Or would I give her a taste of her own medicine? I could have said no. I could have told her that I wasn't good enough for her life, that she'd made her choice and now she had to live with it. Part of me wanted to, but I'm her mother. And being a mother means loving someone even when they don't deserve it, even when they've hurt you in ways you never thought possible. Come home, I said quietly. Come home and we'll figure it out together. She arrived that evening looking nothing like the polished businesswoman who'd left 18 months earlier. Her expensive suit was wrinkled, her perfect hair was a mess, and her face was puffy from crying. She looked like the little girl who used to come to me when she'd had a nightmare, when the world seemed too big and scary to handle alone. We sat at the same kitchen table where she told me I was bad for her image, and this time I was the one who had to be strong. I made her tea in my old chipped mugs, the same ones she'd once been embarrassed by, and I listened to her tell me about her failures, her fears, her regrets. I'm sorry, Mama, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I treated you. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Yes, you were, I said, because honesty was more important than comfort in that moment. You were cruel and you were ungrateful, and you broke my heart in ways I didn't think were possible. She flinched at my words, but she didn't argue. She just sat there, taking the weight of what she'd done. But, I continued, you're still my daughter, and I love you enough to help you learn from this, to help you become the person I always believed you could be. Not the successful businesswoman Jessica, the good person. You know that feeling when you have to teach your own child what love really means? That's what the next few hours were about. I told her about the months of depression, about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, about the way her rejection had made me question everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I also told her about the neighbors who'd rallied around me, about the coworkers who'd offered support, about the community of people who'd never had much money, but who understood the value of loyalty and love. I told her about the life she'd been so eager to escape and helped her see it through new eyes. These people, I said, gesturing toward the window that looked out on our modest neighborhood, they don't have much, but they have each other. They understand that success isn't just about money or status. It's about being someone others can count on, someone who lifts others up instead of climbing over them. Jessica listened, really listened, maybe for the first time in years. And slowly I began to see glimpses of the daughter I'd raised, the one who dreamed of success, but who'd also understood the importance of kindness, of gratitude, of remembering where you came from. I want to fix this, Mama, she said finally. I want to fix us, but I don't know how. We start with honesty, I said. We start with you understanding that love isn't conditional. It's not something you earn or lose based on your bank account or your social status. It's something you give and receive because you're family, because you're connected by something deeper than money or success. For everyone who's felt abandoned by someone they raised with love, I want you to know that forgiveness is possible. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean accepting behavior that's unacceptable. It means setting boundaries, demanding respect, and teaching the people you love that they can't take your love for granted. Over the following weeks, Jessica and I slowly began to rebuild our relationship. She moved back into her old bedroom temporarily, sleeping in the same bed where she'd once dreamed of conquering the world. She helped me with chores, cooked simple meals, remembered what it felt like to live without luxury. More importantly, she began to understand the difference between success and worth. She started volunteering at a local community center, helping kids who reminded her of herself at that age. She reached out to the people she'd hurt during her climb to the top, making amends where she could. Her business did fail, just as she'd feared, but in its place, she built something better. She started a nonprofit organization that helped young entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds, providing not just funding, but mentorship, guidance, and most importantly, a reminder that success should lift others up, not leave them behind. The Jessica who emerged from that dark period was someone I recognized, someone I was proud to call my daughter. She still had ambition, still wanted to make a difference in the world, but she'd learned that true success includes the people who helped you get there. Money can buy you a lot of things, but it can't buy you a mother's love twice. Some people learn that lesson the hard way. My daughter was one of them. But she did learn it, and that's what matters. She learned that the foundation of love and support that launched her toward success was more valuable than any business deal, any investor, any amount of money. She learned that you can't run from who you are, and you can't forget the people who believed in you before you believed in yourself. And she learned that being worthy of love isn't about what you accomplish or how much you earn. It's about how you treat the people who matter most, especially when you think you don't need them anymore. Today, Jessica and I have a different relationship than we had before. It's more honest, more equal, built on mutual respect rather than just maternal love. She's successful again, but this time, her success includes me. She introduces me as her mother with pride, and she never forgets to mention that everything good in her life started with the lessons she learned at our old kitchen table. The woman who once told me I wasn't good enough for her new life now understands that I was the foundation that made any life possible at all. And that's a lesson worth learning, no matter how much it costs.